put the mic on. You might be able to hear me then. Good evening, everybody. Right, and welcome. I should have said that. Apologies for absence. I've got Daniel Walton, Barbara Jones-Williams, Pam Cummings, and David Harrison. Any others? No, thank you. Have we any members making a declaration of interest? No, none. Thank you. Confirmation of previous meetings. Has anybody any comment on those minutes? No. Would you propose them? Thank you. And John, you're seconding. Thank you. And we're all in favour, I presume. Thank you. Right. Right. Chair's announcements. Introduce the officers in attendance. Simon, on my left, is a development manager north. Anna Priestley, next, is a case officer. Lee Walton, on the end, is also a case officer. Jenny Ager, I'll get it right one of these days, is a legal advisor. Bronwyn, who's wandering around, organises us totally. She's the Democratic Services Officer. I don't think we've got any consultees, have we? As such, no. And haven't got any comments as such, except to apologise for members of the public for their lack of numbers on the committee tonight, but we seem to have been hit by quite a few illnesses, so it's rather reduced our numbers. There's an update report. Has everybody had a chance to read it yet? Yeah. Yeah. Yesterday, yeah. Right. And so our first application is M25-02031 full, and that's in Lee's hand. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. If I just take you through the overheads. That's the aerial photograph. What you're looking at is the site outlined in red. You've got a strong hedgerow tree sort of enclosure boundary to the site, which those members that went on Monday would have seen. Also to note, to the south, there's the report refers to sort of historic pattern of development, some backland development that went on there historically. To the next slide, and the red outline submitted. The next slide, and we have the proposed site. Again, we see a traditional agricultural layout arrangement. There's a farmhouse, new build. There's adjacent barns. Plots 2 and 3 would be the larger barns. Plots 4 and 5, the lower range. The next slide, please. Just a quick one. Green infrastructure that's been submitted, supporting biodiversity around the site. Next slide. And then we go into the elevations and floor plans. So this is plot 1, the farmhouse. We move through into the plots 2, and we've got plot 3, which are the larger range, and then on to the plots 4, and we've got 5, so the lower on the along the southern boundary. If we move on, we've got the courtyard scene, seeing the farmhouse, the larger, and then the lower range of buildings as we swivel round. Onto the hard landscaping plan that's submitted, and so on to the boundaries, the different boundaries that are being proposed, curb layout and so on. Street scene on Crown Lane. So we've got the widened point of access that is shown, which I think members commented on during the site visit. The adjacent house occupants, the layout plans show some parking reserved for them within the development. And so on to the photographs. The site, looking from the direction of the access. top looking towards the point of access, and the other way round, looking from the access into the site, the bottom. Another view, and then we've got the aerial, which I think shows the site in terms of its current screening. That screening would be protected as part of the conditions in going forwards. And finally, some illustrations as to how it should look when completed. The recommendation is to approve.
Sorry. Was on. No problem, we turned it on now. Thank you. And no registered objector. With an agent, Liz Nicholson, who's going to speak for 2 minutes, and then Chris Parks is going to talk for 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to say too much. I really just wanted to thank your planning officer, because he has been really helpful through the pre-application process and through the planning application process. He's given really constructive feedback on how we design and lay out the site, which has helped us to rethink the proposals and come up with the scheme that you see tonight. You'll have seen in your committee report that the issue is that there's a permission in principle for this site already given. I think that was allowed on appeal for 5 dwellings. So we have plenty of time to submit a technical details consent for the site, but that doesn't give us the freedom to redesign really what was proposed in that, which reused the existing buildings. So we've submitted a full application for the same number of dwellings. That gives this much better design and layout as it's been described to you. It's proposing something that looks like a farmhouse with barns around it, which is much more appropriate to the area than what could possibly come through the PIP. So it's not a case of there would be no development on this site if the scheme was refused. There will be 5 dwellings on this. We would have to use the technical details consent. There'd be a poorer scheme in our opinion. So we really hope that you could grant this consent tonight for the scheme that you see, which we think will be much better designed, much better laid out, good for the local residents around the site. I think it's been a problem site for something like 14 years, and it will be much better for everybody. So we hope that you can follow your officer's recommendation and grant consent. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Roy. Yeah, good evening, members of the committee. My name is Chris Parks, and I've been a adjoining neighbour to the homestead for the last 20 years. I've lived in the village for 68 years, and for the past 14 years, the homestead has been a state of disrepair. As in the recent Evening News article, I quote, "It's the village eyesore." Not only this, it's been a centre of local vandalism, and the house itself is dangerous and decaying each day. Having spoke to existing neighbours, 99% of all in favour of getting this site cleaned up and get sorted once and for all. Greenly Developments have worked with the local residents to ensure any problems, fences, drainage, hedges will be sorted. Furthermore, I believe this development will fit nicely into the plot and add some much needed bungalows to the village and remove this eyesore once and for all. I hope you will look kindly on this what I've said and vote in favour for this development. If not, it will drag on another 14 years affecting us all. Thank you for your time and listening to me today. Thank you.
Right. Our ward member, Councillor Walton, has apologised. He's not able to make it tonight. He's sent in a written report, which I'm going to read out, so I'm going to be bored with my voice for a while. And we've been okay, we've gone through that, and it's okay with our rules of engagement, as it were. So, as a ward councillor, this is Daniel's words, not mine. As a ward councillor for this area, I'm submitting this note in my absence and request that the Chair uses discretion to present this on my behalf. I want to thank Lee for his careful work with this application, but given the level of local interest in this development and a number of aspects within the report that I believe would benefit from further scrutiny, I wanted to encourage discussion before a decision is agreed at committee. For Dean's sake, I've made this as short as possible. There are quite a lot of points to cover, so my apologies. Areas where there has been concern and where this development deserves that closer scrutiny are where this development may represent an inappropriate overdevelopment of a highly sensitive rural site. It potentially threatens a designated strategic gap, lacks a sustainable drainage strategy, fails local biodiversity requirements and poses unmitigated environmental risks. It is on these potential points that I'd want to open up discussion. Obviously the officer has recommended approval, but I do feel wider discussion is warranted and is appreciated by residents. Conflict with, the first point he's got is conflict with policy SWDP 2, encroachment on the Worcester West significant gap. The application site sits entirely within the designated significant gap between the western edge of Worcester, Lower Broadheath and Rushwick. Policy SWDP 2.d explicitly states that the development within these gaps will only be permitted if it does not compromise the open character of the land or lead to the coalescence of settlements. Replacing what is currently a single redundant dwelling footprint with a dense 5-house courtyard cluster directly violates this protection. The 2022 significant gaps appraisal re-emphasised how vital this specific corridor is to keeping Worcester's urban sprawl from eating into the lower rural identity of Lower Broadheath. Approving a multi-dwelling residential cul-de-sac here sets a dangerous precedent that chips away at this critical open boundary. Whilst it's right that we should judge the application on its own merits, it's clear that this would set a dangerous precedent. Item 2, overdevelopment, density and harm to rural character. Moving from single rural holding, which is what this was going to be, to a dense 5-dwelling mini estate is an aggressive intensification that completely ignores the local context, directly conflicting with policy SWDP 21 design. The tight layout and volume of the proposed buildings create an urbanising effect. SWDP 21 requires all developments to feature a layout and density appropriate to the surrounding landscape character. This proposal does the opposite, forcing a cramped suburban courtyard design onto a rural lane, and it could be seen as being cramped and squeezed in. Access between houses and a busy road with no footpaths and coming out on a bend. The applicant claims the site is hidden, but baseline field data shows that the upper level of these houses will be clearly visible from public right-of-way PROW BH 561 to the northeast. During winter, when the boundary hedges drop their leaves, this large mass of buildings will stand out prominently on the settlement edge. This is a major issue and an understandable one. From the north, you currently can't see anything where this would be easier to see. The site's access point sits directly on Crown East Lane, which forms part of a Three Choirs Way, long-distance recreational walking route. Replacing a quiet rural property boundary with a busy multi-car residential driveway permanently degrades the rural character and scenic value of this popular public asset. Item 3, critical drainage failures and local flood risks, SWDP 28 and SWDP 29. This very area already suffers from significant drainage and surface water issues. The drainage strategy put forward for this development is one of the most concerning aspects of the entire application and should be considered before a decision is made. The report explicitly notes that due to complete lack of ground infiltration capabilities and lack of other sustainable alternatives on the site, Severn Trent has agreed to allow surface water to be discharged directly into the Fell sewer system. Dumping rainwater directly into the Fell sewer network is an unsustainable last resort approach that completely flies in the face of policies SWDP 28, Management Flood Risk, and SWDP 29, Sustainable Drainage Systems. By covering the site in roofs, driveways and hard standing, this development will dramatically increase runoff, Forcing this extra water into a foul network hardly increases the risk of a system backing up and causing foul water flooding nearby. This is an area which has recently had numerous road closures for work on waste connections from Severn Trent and continues to be plagued with flooding. The neighbours to this site are on speed dial to Severn Trent, so this is a concern, as it will increase the foul water flooding for nearby residents. Well, this is usually handled via a planning condition. I strongly believe in relying on a conditional approval for fundamental drainage viability is entirely inappropriate for a site with known issues. However, the committee is minded to approve the application despite flaws. I insist on the following strict pre-commencement condition to be attached to the safeguard neighbours. Now, I'm not going to read out this next bit because I've consulted with Lee and he's taken these conditions and he says they basically are already covered in what he suggested for approval. So I'm going to leave those out. The item 4 is unresolved technical, environmental and ecological risks. Beyond drainage and policy conflicts, the application has several major environmental and technical issues that remain unresolved. The preliminary ecology appraisal confirmed that a derelict structure on site has a high potential for roosting bats. Dusk emergence surveys established active day roosts for common pipistrelle and brown long-eared bats, along with an intermittent roost for the strictly protected lesser horseshoe bat. No work can be legally begin here without a European protected size mitigation licence from Natural England. On-site mitigation has completely failed due to the cramped layout of the houses. The applicant's own biodiversity net gain report shows a statutory diversity net loss of 14.36 for habitat areas. Because they cannot meet this obligation on site, they are forced to buy 0.99 off-site habitat units just to clear a legal hurdle. I'm not sure how we could feel about this as councillors. It's not good for this area of land. And the council's tree and landscape officer has maintained an objection to this project due to a sheer volume of healthy trees and hedges being destroyed to clear space for houses and driveways. And I'm going on to his conclusion. Oh, no, I'm not. Worcester Regulatory Services have raised formal concerns regarding potential contaminated land due to the site's history of agricultural use and unchecked storage of construction waste. WRS explicitly warned that asbestos is likely present in the derelict structures slated for demolition. A full asbestos survey has not been finalised, posing a direct health risk to neighbouring properties during demolition. In conclusion, this application could be seen as a case of trying to force too much onto a sensitive piece of land. It violates SWDP 2 by encroaching on a vital strategic gap, violates SWDP 21 by introducing an inappropriate dense design, and directly fails SWDP 28 and 29 by failing to provide a safe, sustainable drainage strategy in an area already prone to water issues. When you add in the net loss of local biodiversity, the destruction of healthy trees, unresolved contamination risks, the impact on views and today unsecured housing contributions, it's clear that this can't really demonstrate sustainable planning. The added traffic to this area and creeping development is not good for the local area where development in the village has already been significant. I hope you managed to take in some of my garbled reading. Lee, have you got any answers to those points being as such, so we know how?
Sorry. Essentially, going through the list, we look at the comments given us by the Tree and Landscape Officer and Ecology, they would be dealing with what you raised. We've got conditions given us, which are in the report, which deals with an arboricultural method statement, and also the tree officer being on site to discuss with the people actually doing the work. So we've covered those aspects. It's notable that the tree officer did not say object or refuse. He's allowed to have some issues, if you like, which seem to have been overlooked by Councillor Walton. We've also got comments given us by Ecology where they've raised concerns, but equally they've come back with relevant conditions that we'll pick up. The drainage condition that he refers to, I went through our own condition number 3, and that covers all of the pertinent matters that he raised. So again, we've covered that. The contaminated land, we obviously have the response back from our regulatory service. They've picked up on that. They've made comment. They've given us a condition, which is included. I think it's condition 4. So we are reliant on our consultees, our technical consultees, as to what they want. We've not ignored any of the conditions. All the conditions are put into the paper. If I move up the list, then overdevelopment I think is rather difficult to argue, given the area, and there are 5 houses, and we do have at the back, in the background, the permission in principle, and there's still time for them to come in and give us 5 awful executive homes, as I would say, dotted across the site. And the significant gap, which it's nice to be able to wave it in the air, but I think really the key thing here does, from my point of view, it does not compromise the open character of the land. So the significant gap itself, we are at this point quite tight up towards this settlement, and the purpose of the significant gap is to keep this village and Worcester separate places. So again, I think we've been there when we've been at Lysington, notably, where we've on several occasions been up against an inspector and they've allowed appeals despite our own point of view. So
Thank you for that. Being as the local member isn't here and I'm a neighbouring member, you've got to hear a bit more from me now because I'll go first on this. There are only actually 2 members who came on the site visit are ill, which is unfortunate. Tom will be, I think, familiar with the site because it was behind Aaron Forrest's house. We went I think on 2 different planning applications to it. And there's no doubt there is a wreck of a property in the middle of it, which was half constructed and then left to go derelict. I looked at the site. It is well contained with high hedges, which I understand are intended to remain. There is this PIP in place. We wouldn't normally consider this if we'd had a 5-year housing supply when the PIP went in. We would have probably been able to persuade the inspectors not to approve it, but they have, and that still remains in force. And as Lee said, the alternative I think is worse. The access, because of the arrangement with a neighbour, is going to be fairly substantial, that 2 cars are going to be able to pass each other going in, and we've got given worse permissions than that about access. On the whole, I viewed it favourably, but I'll wait to hear from other members. John, would you like to go next, being you did the site visit?
Button. Yes. My initial impression was this was a really good scheme on a basically a derelict site, and I thought the layout, as we've seen tonight, lends itself to the area, in my opinion. I know that there are major concerns about the flooding. That was one thing that I was concerned about, because I think Daniel did explain about there's been lots of problems with adjoining properties, and I would like to ensure that there's a sufficient strategy in place to deal with that. My understanding is that when you build these things, that you're supposed to mitigate for things like that to improve the lessen the flood risk when you build these things. But on the whole, I thought it was. I'm in favour of this scheme, to be quite frank. I think it's a good scheme. I think it certainly improves what is basically an awful site, and I think it's far better than the original PIP, which would have been for these executive homes. I think this is lends itself more to a rural setting. So yeah, that's what I've got to say.
Councillor Godwin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As a previously elected member for the ward, I don't think I'll be standing on Daniel's toes by saying that, but I do know the site. And the one word that Lee didn't mention is pastiche. This is a pastiche farmyard, which is wonderful, isn't it? Because people want to live in barns. That's amazing, isn't it? We're actually going to build things that look like barns from scratch. And you can hear the names now, can't you? You know, the thrashing barn, the stable yard. You know, you can just hear them now. They're running. I can hear the agents actually ripping them off already. So a very interesting design. But yes, a pastiche. Now, if I may ask Lee, the one word we haven't heard is the bat consultation. Bat boxes and bat survival and bat stuff, bearing in mind they spent £1 million building a bridge for bats. Have we got this covered here too?
Yes.
That's do. Yes, he's nodding. Because we've done other farmyards and we've got unstuck with bats before, haven't we? So we need to make sure that's well covered. Bats are mentioned.
By the ecology. Yeah, yeah.
We've covered that. Good. Excellent. Because we wouldn't want that to sort of foul up the process. The other thing is drainage. Bearing in mind the problems that the area have had in the past, and I note the conditions here in your recommendations, you know, runoff, the runoff per second, per litres per second, is that reasonable? Is it does it match the locality, or is it something out of standard figures that the architects have produced?
The condition 3 that we've got was given, which was given us by the drainage engineers, so South Worcester Land Drainage Partnership. So they've considered that aspect. They've given us the condition. There is a site for a pond on site.
This is.
And other things.
I would have thought that would be essential.
The detail is yet to come forward in that sense. It's a condition wording that I note Councillor Walton was suggesting. The more pertinent thing here would be South Severn Trent water and the foul drainage, because I am aware, I've been into neighbouring houses, I'm aware that there have been problems in the location. Obviously, there is separate legislation and regulation going on as well. So from that point of view, there's so much that we can do, and not necessarily, we haven't got the magic wand.
But it's acceptable under current positions.
It's acceptable at the moment. It's also important, I suppose, to comment on it's not 35 new homes.
Exactly.
It's more of a handful. And we are dragged into these things. There are conditions which are occasionally you wonder whether or not they're.
Well, we've got lovely, you know, computer-aided photographs, if I may, Chairman. I'm assuming some of this is going to be permeable surfaces. You know, we're not going to have a lot of runoff off all this tarmac, are we? Right, okay. Well, as Mr. Chairman has said, and my colleague here, knowing the actual appalling state of the site and the building that is there already, I feel that what is proposed, even if it is a pastiche, and it is a fairly good pasture. Oh, does the chimney actually work on the farmhouse?
Possibly not. I think
Oh,
the word I haven't used is contemporary.
Contemporary. Okay,
So-
right, all right. So, because I can imagine there'll be an Arga, right? So that will need a chimney. Okay. So on that basis, I would recommend approval, subject to the conditions, and Lee being all over it during development to make sure that they are actually enforced.
But after listening to other councillors' words, no doubt. Right. Councillor Cathy Wells.
I think that was, yes, unwritten. Just for the sake of accuracy, the tree and landscape officer does actually use the word object. He does say, whilst I continue to object to the proposal, but I think he goes on to make it clear that he realises there are many other things in favour of it, and that's when he talks about his suggested conditions, etc. I'm assuming, going through Daniel's sort of list of bullet points, that as far as the strategic gap is concerned, that was dealt with by the inspector on the PIP. They can build it right up to the hedge, and it's not going to take up any more of the strategic gap than this is taking. Is that right?
There is a building's depth between the red outline that was and the current. So I think by the time we step back and we're looking at this site, you wouldn't see the difference.
Okay, and it is quite a big gap as well, isn't it? So we're not, sometimes we're dealing with a field and it would lose the whole gap if we lost that. Okay. The other query, I think I know the answer to this, but as far as drainage is concerned, given that Severn Trent have not objected, presumably that's not a sustainable reason for us to refuse something.
Because of the nature of the application, the size of the application, we don't consult every consultee. So Severn Trent, we hear from the applicant that they apparently have got an agreement to link in. They would certainly need to go to Severn Trent and to organise themselves along those lines.
So would that be a potential condition that we would want to see that Severn Trent had approved?
Because of the scale of the development, a condition would probably not be reasonable, because the technical aspect would lie primarily with Severn Trent. If there are problems with Severn Trent, then we don't have a timetable to be able to refer to in a condition to make it valid.
Okay, thanks, Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. Much of the issues that I would have raised have already been raised by colleagues. I find myself frustrated sometimes, Chair, when we are almost in a beauty contest between the virtues of this application against the PIP that had been approved previously. Now, I was taught many years ago to judge every application on its merits. It isn't a beauty contest between this and other potential applications. So we need to be a bit careful about that, though the pragmatism that we're all showing isn't misplaced. Back to the drainage system. Now, the local member referred to slightly archaic drainage solution of foul sewerage and storm drainage going down the same pipe. Now, that's something that Victorians did. We tended to move forward a little bit from that solution, and I see quite a lot of reference in Severn Trent's conditions about this and the potential for contamination. I welcome the fact that not one of these properties should be occupied until such a time as the report has been produced and agreed by us, which is absolutely right. Now, forgive me for being a bit cynical, but I always think conditions are important when they can actually be enforced. And when we talk about in the event that contamination is found at any time when carrying out the approved development that was not previously identified, it must be reported immediately to the local planning authority. That's all very well, but who's policing that? That's down to people respecting the process and doing the right thing, even though they know it'll really inconvenience them. And I would just add that at times of flooding elsewhere in the district, often we come across foul sewage entering into the public domain because the storm water has nowhere else to go. And that was a sort of vision that I was hoping we would see less of in future, Chairman, and certainly wouldn't usually be encouraging this kind of coalescence of foul sewage and storm water. So that all being said, I'm minded to approve it.
Can I ask, we quite often see provision of SUDS unit within a development. I'm not aware of one here. Could we ask for that?
And I just on that top left-hand corner, there is a pond on the site, isn't there? Is that part of the system, or is that just an ornamental?
To look good.
There you go. That's that little circle to the oval thing.
If I say ornamental, that doesn't necessarily rule out any detail that then subsequently comes forward. That is a site that can be used.
Right.
We can have both.
Yes, I just noticed that the pond exists, doesn't it? And I presume it's going to be retained and could be useful in mitigation.
Right. Have I, Douglas, I think you've proposed already, haven't you?
A proposed approval subject to the condition listed, and that Lee keeps a close eye on it all.
Right.
I will second it.
Thank you. And can I take, can Jenny take a vote on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. All of those in favour of approval, please raise your voting cards. That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Application has been approved. Next application is the Forge, Crown East, Worcester. And in this case, it's Anna who's going to lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Hold on a second.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the change of use of a property to a preschool with the capacity to accommodate 94 children. It's proposed to convert and extend the existing bungalow on site with the addition of a foyer to the front and covered veranda to the rear, and the siting of a prefabricated classroom block at the rear and the erection of a storage building. In looking at the aerial photograph, you can see that the Forge is a bungalow in the hamlet of Crown East near the A44, which is a significant arterial road connecting a number of settlements in Worcestershire. The site's within the open countryside, but it is less than 300 metres from the settlement boundary for Worcester and its recent residential expansions to the west. The Forge is a typical 1960s dormer bungalow, has a very generous garden curtilage, as you can see from the red line area. It's surrounded on both sides by residential dwellings, and there's open countryside to the east and west. Further to the south is the Grade 2 listed St Thomas Church on the corner. The proposed block plan shows the layout of the development, which includes 14 parking spaces to the front to facilitate drop-off and pick-up, and 21 staff parking spaces to the rear. The prefab classroom block is proposed along the southern boundary with play spaces on the north side. The storage bin and cycle shed will be located to the south, just adjacent to the existing building. These are the existing plans and elevations of the bungalow, just a typical domestic property. And the proposed. So you can see that the existing bungalow is largely to be retained in its current form, but with converting the ground floor, including the garage, into 2 baby rooms and a staff room and office at the first floor level. There's a canopy which will provide a sheltered play space in the form of an external patio to the west of the building, and there are French doors connecting the outdoors with the internal teaching spaces. The entrance is proposed to be remodelled to provide a lobby for parents to wait and accommodate buggies, and as I said, the garage is to be incorporated in the overall facility. At the rear, there is proposed to be a prefabricated classroom block, which would be a functional flat roof type of building. And this classroom is proposed to be externally clad in timber and would form the preschool element of the nursery. This is the proposed bin and cycle storage shed, divided into 2 stores, a bin store and a cycle store. Turning to the photographs, this photograph's looking across the front of the property, which should be largely occupied by the parking spaces for drop-off and pick-up, serving the development. Looking from the front to the back towards the nearest neighbour, and then the rear garden looking back towards the bungalow and looking back towards the neighbours. This is just direct views front and back, just giving you an idea of the amount of space in the curtilage in the garden area. And then just a view looking southwest, because there is another neighbouring property on the south in a sort of backland location, the Crow's Nest. Your officer's recommendation of this application is approval subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Stephen Hunt, and for 25 years I've lived at the Dormers, which shares a long boundary with the northern edge of this site. And along with the 16 other objectors and the Parish Council, we strongly object to this development. We're not opposed to nursery provision, but the answer is to find a location that is safe and within the development boundary, not on a busy, unlit, rural lane where the majority of drivers already break the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. The site is clearly designated countryside. The development plan is clear that the facilities of this scale should be within or adjoining a settlement. The Forge is neither. The officer does not dispute this, but sidesteps it on a procedural technicality, arguing the guidance is in the reasoned justification rather than the policy text itself. The inconsistency with other applications is stark. Several applications for houses on this road have been refused for being outside the development boundary. Why would the bar for a commercial nursery be lower? This committee is not bound by the officer's narrow interpretation. Highways and transport is a big issue. First, Crown East Lane is a notorious rat run, and the traffic baseline is wrong. The applicant's survey was conducted while Bell Lane was closed, which I proved reduced traffic by up to 40%. The committee is being asked to approve 273 additional daily movements concentrated at peak commuter times on a baseline that significantly underestimates existing flows. The applicant's own survey data shows peak demand would require 19 parking spaces. Only 14 are proposed. With no on-street capacity whatsoever, overflow onto Crown East Lane is a mathematical certainty, forcing moving traffic around stationary cars onto an unlit road with children on foot. Second, in 2003, the same highways officer recommended refusal of 9 houses a quarter of a mile up the lane, citing a severe safety concern of conflict between pedestrians and vehicles, especially in darkness and inclement weather. The road has not changed, and a 94-child nursery would be more intensive than 9 houses. Thirdly, the northern visibility splay requires vegetation on my land to be cut back. I have no obligation to do so, and therefore condition 6 is unenforceable against a third-party landowner who objects. So highway safety is a major concern. The mitigations proposed are totally inadequate. No footway, no lighting, no passing places, no speed reduction. They leave the lane itself where the danger is entirely unchanged. So in conclusion, this committee should not approve a large commercial nursery outside the development area in a clearly unsuitable location, which will put road users, young children and local residents at risk. I respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is the agent, Gareth Jones.
Yeah, all good. Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This application seeks permission for the change of use of the forge to provide a new day nursery for local children. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that local residents have raised concerns with the proposal, and these concerns have been carefully considered throughout the application process and have formed a significant part of the assessment undertaken by officers and consultees. However, this evening, I would ask members to consider not only these concerns, but also the substantial evidence that has been independently assessed throughout the determination in this application. National Planning Policy Framework places great weight on the provision of early years facilities. There is a clear and evidence need for additional nursery places in the area. Worcestershire County Council's own education team supports the application and confirms that over 1,600 new homes have been approved in the surrounding area, generating a need for 364 additional early years children's spaces, increasing demand over the coming years. Little Lodge already operates 2 Ofsted outstanding rated nurseries in the Worcester area, and both settings are operating at or close to capacity and regularly receive inquiries that they're unable to accommodate. This proposal would help them meet growing demand and provide high quality childcare for local families. Members will also note that this application has been subject to extensive scrutiny by all relevant statutory consultees. Highways initially requested further information, and the applicant responded with additional transport evidence, revised layouts and operational data from existing nurseries. Following that review, the Highways Authority raises no objection. Environmental Health raised no objection. Ecology and Drainage raised no objection. And Worcestershire County Council's education team actively support the proposal. In short, every technical consultee who has reviewed the scheme is satisfied that it can operate safely and appropriately subject to recommended conditions. Importantly, the scheme also delivers tangible improvements to local infrastructure with an improved, with a pedestrian crossing secured by Section 106, promoting sustainable travel through cycle parking and a travel plan. The scheme utilises an internal layout that allows vehicles to enter, pass and queue within the site without impacting the public highway. The committee report concludes that the proposal would not result in unacceptable impacts on highways, amenity and other matters, with the public benefits of the scheme outweighing any limited harm. The proposal would provide much needed high quality childcare, create local employment opportunities and give children the best possible start to life. To conclude, I would like to thank officers for their hard work throughout the application and their presentation this evening. Little Lodge have a long history of supporting local communities and groups across Worcestershire and look forward to continuing that commitment through this new setting. I would therefore respectfully ask members to support the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
One of these days I'll learn how to use it. Thank you, Van. We've 2 local members here. I know Councillor Sarah Rouse wishes to speak. and also a new councillor, Councillor McSweeney. You're going first, are you, Councillor McSweeney? You get 5 minutes as a councillor.
Yes, thank you. My first time speaking as the Morven Hills District Councillor. I mean, I would like to very much back up what the parish council is saying about this application, and I mean, I've read through all the comments. I've spoken to the parish council about this, and I fundamentally agree with their comments. I will go through some of them. I have some things to add from my own experience where I think I maybe have things to add which may give me greater credibility than anybody else who's commented on this. Clearly, we have an issue with the traffic levels along here, has previously been stated by the previous speaker about the sort of survey, the sort of the speeds of traffic along the road along Crown East Lane, and the volumes of traffic along Crown East Lane. And I want to sort of emphasise again the issue with the traffic survey submitted by the applicant, which was taken whilst Bell Lane was closed, which resulted in much lower traffic levels. Now, I note in the officer's report, paragraph 7511, it comments about it, the traffic survey being submitted by an objector being 8 months older. With this, an implication that this makes it invalid, but I would argue, well, is traffic suddenly decreased over 8 months? Is this what is being suggested? I think sort of like the idea that something that was 8 months older when Bell Lane was open, that it seems to be a more valid thing. And what we should be doing is we should be querying the difference between the two surveys and the traffic levels. And so we have data on the traffic and speed. And I mean, again, I will go into the point that sort of that it has been mentioned that the highways has no objection, but I would argue that this is based upon flawed data because they are not considering the correct data. I noted in the report that there are comments about the sort of like the objectors' traffic survey data. Now, I acknowledge that it may not be perfect, but I think the data is actually there. And in terms of the data, that is better data than submitted by the applicant. I think that's enough on that specific point about the traffic levels. Just wanted to comment on a few other things about sort of like transport and traffic. The buses mentioned. Now, I note that it's agreed that it's not going to be suitable for use for parents taking their children to this, but there was a suggestion that it may be suitable for members of staff. No, but I know very well somebody who works in the nursery, and I would dispute the fact that the bus service is likely to be useful for members of staff given the working patterns that they use. Certainly, my experience of knowing somebody very well who works in the nursery, I doubt very much the bus service would be of any use to them. But then I'm going to come on to active travel. Now, I suspect I may well have greater credentials on active travel than anybody else in this room. I bring my credentials with me. When my children were at nursery, I cycled with them to take them to nursery, and on occasions when they were older, they managed to cycle themselves. I'm sure Councillor Tom Wells here at least will know King's End Lane, and say I cycled them down to there, and that was fine. I would not cycle with my children to this nursery. I would not use that. I would not walk with my children to this nursery from the proposed places where they're suggesting people will come to within Rushwick or the new developments east of Worcester. I've walked along that road very, very recently in the last few weeks along the A44. I find it quite scary as an adult going along there. Not with children. It's really not a suitable active travel route at all. I'm thinking I speak with fairly good authority on this on active travel, that it's not a suitable route. And I also note that on a previous application, very close by, Bike Worcester submitted a report dismissing the suggested use of active travel for cycling to get there. And this was on the basis of adults, not adults with children. Okay, yeah, I'll try and finish very quickly. I'll whiz through. I wasn't expecting to fill 5 minutes. I'll just say new housing is cited as generating demand. I would suggest maybe the that should be fulfilled where the new housing is rather than here. I'll just again sort of back up sort of previous comments about sort of average versus peak for the number of parking spaces needed. Maybe this is not suitable. Just finally on the uncontrolled pedestrian crossing, to me that is not useful additional active travel infrastructure. Thank you.
Councillor Rouse, who is far more experienced at speaking in this chamber.
There you go. Yeah, I've been around a while. Okay, so I brought this to committee because those parish stop laughing at me because the parish council objected, and so did a lot of residents. And for me, when I looked at this application, the fact that I live next to Lyme Bransford Primary School gave me a real indication to what it's like when you live next to somewhere where there's going to be 94 children dropped off every day. I've got 200. And interestingly, the primary school is also just put in a nursery, but they're hoping to use the new 80 place car park opposite the school. So that sort of recognises to me how many car park spaces you actually need with this. The key for this is really, as Councillor McSweeney said, the sustainable transport. So you look at condition 7, and it says that they're going to put in cycle storage, and there was a lovely little picture of the cycle storage building. And they had to do that for Lyme Bransford School as well, because part of their transport plan was to say that people were going to cycle there. I don't think I've ever seen anyone cycle anywhere near it, and there's never been a bike in that cycle rack because you need a death wish to cycle up the A4103 to get there. So to be quite honest, throughout the application, highways do say that people will not be going to be cycling here. They're not going to use the bus service. They are going to drive. And that actually restricts this nursery to only people who can drive, because no one else is going to be getting there. There is mention of all the new houses that are going to be built, but you're not basing this decision tonight on what might happen in the future or where people might go. It's what's happening on that road now. And so when you move to condition 8, it says that the applicant will be required to do a mode shift stars accreditation. And I'm not sure if anyone actually looked what that means. It simply means that they will propose 10 things that might help with a traffic problem. And that's it. It might help. They might, and they've done it in my school. They might suggest a walking bus. They might suggest people cycle. But if they don't do it, there's no comeback. So conditions 8 actually says, in the interest of highway safety, to actually do this. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong one. To reduce vehicle movements and promote sustainable access in accordance with policies SWDP 6 and 28, that we need this. But actually, it doesn't mean that anything will happen. So we're admitting that there's a problem with active travel and with sustainability and with transport, and there could well be all of this. But the condition that you're being asked to prove has no teeth, is unenforceable, and actually could change nothing. So very much for me, I understand that to refuse a planning application where every statutory consultee has said it's all right is very difficult. However, sometimes they do get it wrong at highways. I remember one in West Malvern where they have overturned what highways thought and said they could build it, which I thought was slightly odd. And one in Powick where we're actually at the shop, they said, actually, do you not know? That's not right. And I get that we need more nursery places. And if we have another 90 children at Lyme Bransford Primary School, that's probably not my best plan. But I think that's a sustainable, safe place to build a nursery, not up a country lane that's a rat run where nobody can cycle to, there's no bus service, and the only condition you're going to approve means absolutely nothing and is unenforceable. So what I'm bringing to you tonight is actually, if you really believe condition 7 and 8 are going to do what they say, then approve it. But actually, if you believe that they're not going to deliver any solutions and that there is going to be a problem with sustainable transport, then I would very much ask that you'd look to refuse it, and refuse it on the basis that this is not a sustainable location or a safe location for a nursery for 273 transport movements a day. And I suspect if an appeal inspector goes and stands on that road, they might agree. Okay, so thank you very much.
Right. Councillor Kathy Wells, I'm glad you volunteered to go first.
Try and stop me. Couple of things. If we set aside for the moment the thought that nobody in their right mind would walk down this road, The pedestrian crossing that was mentioned, am I right in thinking that is basically white paint on the road? It's not, there are no traffic lights, there's no, it's just a lot of stripes.
No Belisha beacon.
Oh, I don't know if they make those anymore. We're both showing our age, but the fact we know what they are. Okay, so that was my thought. More importantly, the northern visibility splay. Can we have a bit of information on that? Because if it is impossible to achieve, that is a significant issue.
The plans that we've got show that the visibility display crosses no third-party land. I believe that probably what is being referred to is maybe overhang onto the highways-owned verge of which obviously highways would be able to cut back to their land ownership. Otherwise, I'm not sure where that's thought process has come from. That's just me making an assumption, but it's certainly on the plans we've got. It doesn't. It's on the visibility displays are across the applicant's land and then onto highways verge.
Okay, so if there were an issue, it would be vegetation which would be encroaching on highways land, and highways would therefore be okay to cut that back, is what we think. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, as I was one that's turned up to the site visit, perhaps I should make a comment on this. My initial impression, and it is an impression, was yes, these are very fine and well needed facilities, but it's in the wrong location. I have a problem even knowing whether this so-called pedestrian crossing is going to go, because there's no pavement on the east side, and obviously there's a pavement on the west side. I've got that right way round, haven't I? There is a pavement that goes south on the A44, nothing the other side of the road either. It's too far away from the intended developments. You said 300 metres. 300 metres is a long distance when you're just, and it will involve the use of cars primarily. No, there's no footpaths that I'm aware of that would lead directly from the proposed developments to the east and this location. I think the local councillors have brought up some relevant arguments, particularly all around about the transport and the access to the development, and that's my major concern. Is the fact that I still feel it's in the wrong location. That's how I feel about it.
Yes. No. Yes. Councillor Duncan Godwin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, as a former elected member before we moved all the boundaries.
1881.
Oh, yes. The church on the corner, when that was, work was done on that and a lot of renovation was done on it, which was needed and supported by the community, it caused quite a lot of difficulties with traffic on that junction. Just behind it's the old schoolhouse, the last glove factory in Worcestershire, I seem to remember. That caused quite a considerable amount of trouble when they were doing the works and conversions on that, particularly in the mornings. Yes, I was actually held up in the mornings there, yes. No interest declared. My colleague here has said, you know, it would be lovely to have it, but it's in the wrong place. It needs to go somewhere else. I don't think there's a main sewer down that road. You know, running a school on a septic tank is going to be a bit difficult. So with some of the things that Sarah has mentioned, and some of the things that Councillor Michaels mentioned, I feel that it is an inappropriate development and therefore should be refused. Is there anybody else wanting to speak?
Thank you. Again, I'll try to mop up. So I think most of us here this evening amongst the committee have concerns about this application, but I think we're troubled to find a hook to hang those concerns on, particularly since the Highway Authority is not objecting. But isn't it the case that the golden thread of sustainability runs through our new local plan? And whilst it may not be a specific condition to be found somewhere in the glossary, it is nevertheless a key driver for determining appropriate allocation of land for the foreseeable future. And isn't it the case, Chairman, that when you consider this site, what everyone has been saying is it's an unsustainable location, over-reliant on public transport, which may or may not provide the answers. So I think that whilst we might find it difficult to find a specific condition that we would be looking for, is it not the case that this is an unsustainable location for a provision of this kind up to, I think, nearly 100 children? And for that reason, I'd move refusal.
I don't think I've got anything new to say. On the site visit, I was concerned. One of my local primary schools has about 90 children in, and I go and pick the grandchildren up from there sometimes, and the parking is horrendous. Luckily, it's off the main road and not a great traffic flow. Sarah referred to it in that all our expert reports tell us it's perfectly okay. And yet I find it hard to believe. I accept it's different from primary school in that they've all got to get there at 8:45 or whatever it is. And this will be mothers, and there won't, basically it will be mothers dropping off children to go to work, and they might be doing it at different times, but that will still be clustered to a certain extent. You see clusters of transport going all the time where you get very busy, 10 quarter minutes, 20 minutes going past my house, and then it's quiet for the next half hour, and then you get another cluster. I don't believe it's not going to cause traffic problems. I don't believe there won't be at some stage an accident with a parent coming out of that car park because there's not sufficient room and going into what is a relatively busy rat run road.
It's a very bad junction, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. To my mind, it isn't a sustainable solution. There should have been a solution involved in one of the new developments. We can't insist on that, but that would be far more sensible. And then those who weren't rushing off to work could have walked their children to there. But I cannot see it. This crossing, I think, is just a total waste of time. But anyway, so Tom, we've got your proposal before you listen to my words of wonder, but I will allow that. And
can I also add in, Jeff, through you, thank you. Added to all the problems we can already see with this road and people going in and out, had they been able to build a larger car park and accommodate the sort of peak flow that they were talking about, it would still have been difficult. But given that it doesn't look as though it is going to be adequate, there will be cars that are sort of pulling in on the road, which is already narrow, and that's worsening the traffic conditions, which we've all acknowledged are already bad. So I don't know whether that's of help.
Right, do we have we've got a slightly previous motion from Tom for refusal. Sorry. Oh, right, yes. Yes, if you could. Thank you. Simon's going to...
I'd listened very carefully to what's been said and just wanted us to be clear what reason, you know, if the mood is to refuse the application, what that might take. So I've got the proposed development would, by reason of its location, result in an unsustainable form of development which could not be adequately mitigated by conditions, and would risk compromising highway safety as a consequence of associated private vehicle movements. Consequently, it'd be contrary to SWDPR 5, 6, and I think 28, criterion 6.
Probably.
13
Oh,
Just 13.
as well.
With this no,
These are
obviously
new-
tied to
new
13.
reasons.
That's to do with district and town local centres, and there's nothing about community development in there. It's all retail.
yeah, we
leisure,
don't think
tourism.
13 is relevant, unless we're talking about the old plan.
I apologise for my lack of education, Simon. But
We should add in one.
And my colleague's saying policy SWDPR 1 as well on climate change. Okay, there's no doubt a reference in the framework which we can add that's pertinent to those. I don't have that in front of me, so you'll forgive me for that. But I think that's does that capture the
Chairman, it does. I mean, if I were scripting, I think I might have also just acknowledged the highway response and words of notwithstanding the lack of an objection, so that we understand we're not playing, we're not playing here without understanding the ramifications of what we're saying.
The local member did mention that road being closed, and it was. I mean, I couldn't get through Broadheath to this way or that way for about 6 months, so it must have impacted on the traffic numbers considerably. John, you're seconding. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Is everybody clear? Everybody happy? All those in favour of the motion to refuse planning permission contrary to officer recommendation, please raise your voting cards. That's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Next application is at Alfric. Oh, we can do. Anybody wishes to leave now? That'll be an interesting one. And it is again, the next application is Land at Elfric, Parent Elfric. And it's again Anna who's leading on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's me all night, I'm afraid. This application seeks permission for an area of hard standing, new access and erection of a stable block, including the demolition of an existing small agricultural building on site, as well as the change of use of land to equestrian. And the stable block is proposed to stand on the location of the existing agricultural building. This is a revised scheme following the refusal of a previous application for this proposal, but with a number of permanent fence enclosures on the previous proposal, which was refused for the following reason. The application site is situated within the Malvern Hills National Landscape and in an area where the irregular pattern of assorted fields, assorted fields, forms part of the key characteristics of the local landscape character. In stark contrast, the introduction of a regular pattern of fenced enclosures and consequent subdivision of this open land arising from its equestrian use would fail to follow or respect historic field patterns and boundaries. The cumulative impact of the change of use for equestrian purposes, the consequential subdivision of the open and agrarian pasture land into enclosed paddocks, allied to the flanking of the public right-of-way, bisecting land would fail to conserve or enhance the natural beauty of the Malvern Hills national landscape or its setting, and detract from views from the public right-of-way. So this is a revised application which has removed any fencing or permanent subdivision from the land, but other than that, the stables and access remain as previously proposed. The aerial photograph shows the parcel of land which is located within the rural area of Alfric Pound, just outside of the southwestern edge of the main village of Alfric. The land equates to just under 1.87 hectares and is predominantly pasture land, and as I've mentioned, lies within the Malvern Hills National Landscape. The site is located within a small cluster of residential properties located along the rural lane known as Stocks Lane, and the far northern field boundary of the site runs parallel with the southern carriageway edge. The western field boundary runs along the garden boundaries of residential properties, and there's another separate residential property to the northeast of the site, which hopefully you can see all of those on that plan. And the remaining boundaries of the land to the south and southeast corner overlook open countryside. There is a network of public rights-of-way that cross the land, actually identified on the proposed plan more thoroughly, so you'll see those in a short while. Just to show the existing site plan, which identifies the agricultural building located on the land, and then the proposed site plan, which shows the new footprint of the new stable block, the hardcore concrete skirting area, the closure of the existing access and the new access that's proposed. You can also see on this plan that there is a trailer shown, which would be the place where there would be manure storage, and the visibility displays, which you should be able to also see on, oh no, that's on a later plan. I will show you that one later. These are the proposed stables, which are a typical L-shaped wooden structure with 2 loose boxes, hay barn and tack room. And this is the access, so you can see the visibility displays that are on the proposed land go for the proposed new access, cross over the highway verge. So the loss of hedgerow will be contained to the access frontage in terms of breaking through the hedgerow to create that access, as well as retention of existing native hedgerows on the site. A rich native hedgerow is proposed along the northern boundary as part of the BNG. Across, these are the drainage proposals. Right, turning to the photographs with the views across the site. This is looking into the site towards the existing agricultural building. You can see from this and later photographs that the fencing that formed part of the refusal for the previous application has already been installed on the land, but does not form part of this application. So the idea is that it would be removed, and that temporary tape type fencing will be used where it's required. This is another view of the existing building, looking back from south to north. Looking alongside the site from north to south, so along the public footpath, and then looking across the site on a wider view, and then looking northeast across the site. Yeah, your officer's recommendation is for approval of this application, as it's considered that the changes with the removal of the permanent fencing and the introduction of a conservation management plan have overcome the Malvern Hills Landscape team's previous objections. This is subject to the conditions set out in your officer's report.
Parish Council representative, Councillor Tom Clark. You've got 3 minutes, Tom.
Chairman, members of the committee, as Chair of Alfric and Knowlesbury Parish Council, I'm speaking on behalf of the Parish Council who resolved to object to this application. A primary concern of the Parish Council is biodiversity on a site located within the Malvern Hills National Landscape. The council raised specific concerns about the impact of the proposed new access on the existing hedgerow. The preservation of that hedgerow remains important, not only as a landscape feature, but because of its biodiversity value in an environmentally sensitive location. On a site within the Malvern Hills National Landscape, ecological connectivity and the conservation of natural beauty should of course carry significant weight. The Parish Council's biodiversity and landscape concerns are underscored by the continued objection of the Malvern Hills National Landscape Partnership. We note their professional assessment that the transformation of this traditional hay meadow into land use for equestrian activity has already resulted in degradation of pasture structure, compaction, poaching, and changes to landscape character. The Parish Council is particularly concerned that this proposal represents more than the simple grazing of horses. It involves a permanent equestrian use, including stabling, hard standing, access works, and associated infrastructure, all within a sensitive landscape. The environmental implications of that change should be fully assessed against the requirements of SWDP 22 and SWDP 25. We therefore ask the committee to carefully consider whether the benefits of this application and the proposed mitigation are sufficient to overcome the environmental and ecological protections contained within the South Worcestershire Development Plan, particularly given the continued objection of the Malvern Hills National Landscape Partnership. Finally, the Parish Council also raised concerns in relation to fencing and public footpath access. If members are minded to approve the application, we ask that clear and enforceable conditions are imposed to protect public footpath access, prevent inappropriate fencing, preserve the hedgerow as far as possible, and secure proper long-term land management. Thank you.
We have an objector, Pam Woodall. Thank you. And you get 3 minutes.
Hello. Yes, so the photographs are, damage had already occurred and those are taken at this time of year. You can see the buttercups there. Obviously, it's far worse in the winter, the destruction that's happened to the land. So this development it's the focal point of the hamlet of Alfric Pound. It's encircled, as you saw on the plan, by a number of houses, and most people are objecting, if not all, to this development that's been ongoing and unchecked for the last 3 years. Protection. This field pattern, the assorted pattern of the fields, has been unchanged for the last 140 years, and it has a distinctive cultural history. A listed building overlooks the land, the ruins of the Pound and other historic buildings are all directly facing onto it. It's a key objective of the Worcestershire Landscape Character Assessment, the Malvern Hills National Landscape, and a material planning consideration that this land is protected for future generations. Club Meadow is best suited to low intensity grazing and occasional hay production, which has historically been its use. It borders the Knapp and Paper Mill Nature Reserve, who did try to purchase the land to extend the reserve and protect the meadow and the biodiversity. It's not compatible with equestrian use, and the wider ecology of the former meadow before the damage occurred is vital to the Knapp and Paper Mill Reserve. The new access that's proposed is wanting to remove 11 metres of the ancient hedgerow. It's not mentioned, the legislation protecting ancient hedgerows is not mentioned in the report. However, it's really important because this hedgerow, the access is 11 metres proposed, 11 metres of hedgerow to be removed. The existing access is 4 metres wide. The new access and the manure trailer is 6 metres from the properties opposite the proposed new entrance. The resting and regenerative approach is not achievable. Which has been proposed in the the land management plan. I know that the landscape, Malvern Hills National Landscape, would like the opinion of the landscape and biodiversity officer and also the tree and landscape officer to be consulted. Thank you.
Right, and now we have our applicant, Annabelle Langford.
Good evening. My name is Annabelle Langford and I am the applicant. I wanted to take a few moments to explain what I'm hoping to achieve through this application and why it is important to me. When I purchased Club Meadow, my intention was simply to provide my 2 horses with a safe, permanent home where I can care for them properly throughout their lives. That remains my intention today. My focus has always been on providing a home for my horses whilst caring for the land that they live on. I have no wider plans for the site beyond the proposal that you see before you today. The countryside is something I care deeply about, and one of the reasons I was drawn to this site was its rural character and natural beauty. I want it to remain that way. I also recognise that the site is enjoyed by others as well as me, and I have always and will always manage it responsibly with that in mind. Since purchasing the site, I have taken an active role in managing and maintaining the land throughout the seasons to the best of my ability, because I care about its long-term condition. Looking after the land and looking after my horses go hand in hand, and I recognise the responsibility that comes with owning and caring for a piece of countryside such as this. Throughout the process, I have worked alongside the council, ecologists and my planning consultant to find a solution that not only meets the needs of my horses, but also respects and protects the landscape. I have sought to work collaboratively throughout and have accepted the recommendations and requirements that have been made to me. The Conservation Land Management Plan and the BNG survey is particularly important to me because it reflects my commitment not only to maintaining the site, but to improving it for the future. I believe the officer's report reflects a considerable work that has gone into finding a balanced solution that supports both the ongoing care of my horses and the long-term stewardship of the land. I appreciate that your decision must be based on planning considerations and the information before you. I simply wanted to explain that behind the plans, reports and documents is somebody who genuinely cares about this land and wants to look after it responsibly for many years to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Right, we've got 2 parish councillors. Two district councillors. Sarah, you're going first this time.
Okay, thank you. Again, I brought the application before the committee because of the objections, and also the parish council objected. I always think if the parish council objects, it's important to bring it to committee. So I'm sure you all remember that my first degree is an environmental one. So I have probably bored you to death about newts many times over the last 10 years. What I've felt about this application when I've looked at it is I'm just not sure that the biodiversity net gain and the conditions 5 and 11 are actually deliverable. So some of you may remember that actually where our parish chairman lives, that development was built on the condition that the field next to it would be managed for biodiversity net gain, and that it would be grazed for 10 months of the year, and all of these things would happen. And I'm not sure how long ago it was built, but nothing has ever been done. None of those conditions have ever been followed. So all of those things that we put on that bit of land that they were to happen to offset the building of those houses never occurred. It's never been enforceable, and it's not been possible to do. I've read the land management plan, and whilst it sounds, quite woolly and good, and it's got detail in it, unless you're an ecologist, how are you going to know that that sward is what it is? What is light grazing? How many horses can this site actually carry? If you're leaving it for 50%, over the winter, that actually means the other 50% is going to be overgrazed, because when I've done the calculation on it, it's 2 to 3 horses for that site over the year. But when you come to the winter months, you're putting them all on one bit. So every year, 50% of the site is going to be overgrazed and turn into possibly a mud bath. So I just don't think that this is actually a deliverable solution. And when you read the report, the National Landscapes wanted the ecologist to confirm what they thought, and there's been no update from the ecologist on the site at all that I've been able to read. And I did contact Anna about what was the number of horses that was going to be suggested on the site, but then I forgot to follow it up. So we don't actually have a land management plan for this site that I believe is deliverable or that is accurate. So how many horses do we think should be on there? When are they going to be moved? Where are you going to move them to? If you're making hay, how are you going to manage the sward height? So my actual belief is, I support the National Landscapes, that I don't believe that this is a deliverable option. However, if you were to think that actually you do believe it's deliverable, I believe we need to put in some more very stringent conditions on this site. One of them would be removing permitted developments, so there's no parking of lorries or trucks or anything like that on the site, that it would only be for equine use, so nothing else is to happen on that site, no other businesses or anything like that. You need to limit the number of horses to that site. And I actually believe that it should be the similar condition to the one that was put on quite a lot of them, and that site. They're not there over the winter. Because if it was an agricultural field, you'd take them off. We don't have cattle usually outside over the winter making a mess of everything. So for me, I don't believe it's deliverable. And I believe if we grant permission, no matter how hard someone tries to do that, I don't think it's something that you can do unless you're an ecologist as well. So I would very much like to see it refused. However, if you believe you need to approve it, I think you need to add those conditions that I mentioned that mean that those are the things that someone can see. So there's only ever 2 horses on that site, that 50% of that site over winter is actually this happens and that happens, because otherwise no one will be able to, unless we've got an ecologist sitting there, nobody's going to be able to monitor this. Okay, thank you.
Right, Councillor McSweeney, is it Chris, by the way? Sorry, right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I won't take much of your time, but I don't think I have very much to add. I just wanted to say that I support the position of the parish council, and clearly this application, in order to sort of provide required highway displays, results in sort of significant loss of hedgerow, which does have a significant impact in the quality of the biodiversity here. And I'm just basically, I'm going to say this is somewhere where I have a huge amount of expertise at the moment, so I'll just sort of kind of leave it there and just say I'll back up the comments previously from the parish council and from Sarah, my colleague Sarah. So I won't take any more of your time. Thank you.
Anna, have you? And we've had quite a few claims. Have you any comments to the?
Just to reiterate that the application is in the same form that it was previously, with the only difference being that we are now not looking at the permanent enclosure of the fields with the fencing. And when the application was refused before, following comments that were provided by the National Landscape team at that time, the reasons given were to do with the pattern of the field formation and the subdivision with the permanent fencing. That was the main concern at that time. That was the reason we've refused it. So I would just say we shouldn't realistically be looking at other reasons. For example, the access, that was not raised as a concern or an objection previously, and it was on that application. If that concern was there then it should have formed a reason for refusal. So that's the only point I think I would make.
I'm going to go first, and then John.
Chair, I need to take some advice.
Oh, right,
please.
go on.
Because the objection was by the Malvern Hills National Landscape Partnership, which is linked to the Malvern Hills Trust. I am chair of Malvern Hills Trust, and I'm wondering whether I should declare an interest on this.
No. Sorry, John. In what sense? I missed the
Well,
start
I'm
of
chair.
that.
I'm chair of Malvern Hills Trust, which
Yeah.
is linked to the National Landscape Partnership. Okay.
Yeah.
And they have made an objection against this application.
Well, you have a dispensation, don't you, as a chair of
I'm not
Malvern
sure
Hills
if I have.
Trust? You do, so that's fine.
I have. Okay. Okay. I'll take part in the debate then.
Fine. Right. I went on the site visit. I looked at it. And my initial thought hasn't much changed. Sometimes you have cattle in fields, sometimes you have horses in fields. We've heard various views on what is appropriate, and we take a balance. I'm convinced that the people who are against it think they know best. I was also convinced that the applicant was intent on doing her best. I, on the whole, would not want to interfere with somebody using their land for something which is a natural purpose in the countryside. And that's where I am at the moment. Have we got somebody else wishing to speak?
Yeah, very briefly. One of the concerns, obviously, was the fencing, etc. I have a concern about the is it the public right of way 628? Will that remain open? I take it there will be no obstructions to that public right of way, and I take it is it access via a stile or something on the corner?
It's a style.
It's a style. It is a style. Okay, that was my only concern, that if any areas were roped off, etc., it wouldn't impinge on the public right of ways. Okay.
I think if they were to be roped off, it would be in a similar style to how the fencing's being erected at the moment, which is to leave pathways, but it would be with using the dark temporary tape type fencing that they've included in the management plan.
Yeah, but I'm sorry to just come back, Chair. We've had problems in Kemsey on Kemsey Common with lots of horses, etc., and the interaction between dog owners and horses has not been good, and I would just like to raise that issue.
But you do have footpaths going through fields, so with horses, yeah. Anybody else wish to speak? Thank you, Douglas.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Biodiversity net gain. Can we put they've got a creeping buttercup problem already. We can put that back up. But I want to ask Anna, this is recreational enjoyment, amenity land. It is not a business.
Yes, it's proposed for personal recreational use. It wouldn't be allowed as business use without further permission.
If the committee are minded to approve it, I think that should be a condition, that it is not or ever a business. It is recreational use for the very erudite lady that spoke, for her use and her horses and for her enjoyment. That would be one of my concerns, because there is some of these things can grow by topsy, right? The other thing that Councillor Rouse mentioned was no further development, which I think would be a very sensible addition as a condition. Now, how are we going to monitor the biodiversity net gain? How is this going to be assessed in the future? Not declaring an interest, but member of the Royal Agricultural College, and not an elected member for the area this time. There needs to be careful management for this land from its historical context. It was a hay meadow. and there is some remnants of the pound still about. So historical context within its grounds and within its circumstance within the village must be respected. So if it could be conditioned that the biodiversity net gain was assessed on a rolling basis and was improved, I would be minded to approve it. But I await other comments before I move. Thank you.
Councillor
you.
Kathy Wells.
That's fine. You can call me Kathy. I've been called worse. I just doesn't mean he gets away with it, Douglas. Just wanted to check. I can't see a specific condition. We mentioned earlier fencing that was there that wasn't the right type of fencing, and the assumption was that it would be taken down. Are we doing a bit more than assuming? Have we got a condition for it? Because I'm reading through it briefly, I've not been able to spot it, and it's probably there.
We wouldn't be recommending a condition requiring the removal of the fencing.
Okay.
Because the use isn't presently authorised, so the fencing isn't authorised. There are no PD rights on land that doesn't have an authorised use. So we've got other means of dealing with the fencing if the fencing weren't removed. But I think there is a condition removing permitted development rights for future fencing, and of course I think the management plan would have details of the fencing that would be considered acceptable, temporary nature fencing rather than permanent fencing. So that's dealt with. I just wanted to, if I may, Chairman, come back on a point that was made about other permitted development rights. As far as I'm aware, there aren't any for equestrian use. We can't put a condition on saying no vehicles can be parked sort of near the buildings that are related to the use. That's vehicles aren't development, so that's not something we can control. So if somebody has a horse box and they park it there, then that's part and parcel of an equestrian use. So you would see that.
And am I right? We can't put a personal use on it, but could we restrict the number of animals?
I don't know of any example of where we might have done that before. I had sort of considered that after Councillor Rouse had contacted me and gone back and forth on that point. But I think the information they've put in place within the document should address like the welfare and the management of the land without needing to do something which we're not 100% sure whether would even be enforceable or how it would be enforceable. I think that's the issue. In terms of the private use of the land and the no business use, there's a condition recommended on number 10 if councillors haven't seen that. I don't know if Simon could answer the matter of the number of horses better than me potentially. Have you got anything?
No, fogey. Yeah, it's 2.471. So okay, I'll work it out.
Just finish the point I was going to make. Well, it's a different point, but it was a second one that I wanted to say. Does the reason for objecting previously really restrict us to the extent that you were implying? I mean, if we looked at that last plan and thought that the regular fences, the fencing off of regular areas of the field was so strikingly wrong that was a very obvious main objection, that was the thing that we were most concerned about, then we may have put that down as our reason and not included anything else that we were slightly less concerned about. So does it really stop us? You're nodding, Simon. So does it really stop us using those as objections now?
You're at liberty as members of the committee to put forward any refusal reasons within reason. And obviously, then I might try and advise you to the contrary. The cautionary note here is that that element of the proposal hasn't changed. So, in terms of reasonableness, the local planning authority, whether you consider that to be in the guise of an officer level delegated decision or committee, has made a decision on a proposal which, in terms of the access, hasn't changed. Didn't raise that concern last time. And now if it were to introduce that concern, then that might prevail as a refusal reason, but I think the applicant would be able to take issue with that in terms of reasonableness through
So
the
an
appeal
inspector's
cost
view on that would
process,
be,
you know.
yeah, different from.
So we're
ours.
exposing ourselves to an application for costs at appeal.
Mr. Godwin again.
It's 2.6 acres.
4.6 acres.
So 4.6, so 2 horses would be about the maximum you could get. I'd like to move if you could. Does anybody else want to move? Thank you very much, Chairman. Taking into account in the round and the conditions that Anna has listed, which I think have to be put into the agreement, I would move approval.
Thank you. We got a seconder for that? Right, thank you, John. Do we need the reasons read out first, as such, that you've gathered from us for approval? It's just to approve a recommend, which are in the report already, yes. Yeah. Yeah, so that's.
Thank you, Chair. Are all those in favour of approval in line with officer's recommendation, please raise your voting cards. That's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Right, anybody wishes to leave now? Right. The next one is the application for the land at Broadheath, Tenbury, and Anna is on yet again.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the material change of use of land to a gypsy traveller site comprising of 2 pitches each with a mobile home, a touring caravan and a small storage shed. The application site comprises a parcel of land which is located on the northern side of the B4204 and the eastern side of New Road at the junction between the two highways. The site historically formed a part of a linear section of trees and vegetation which extends eastward along the B4204 to the dwelling known as South Lodge and westwards to a point approximately 246 metres from the application site, which hopefully you can see on the aerial. The application is surrounded by open countryside and in a mix of agricultural use and woodland. The site area is approximately 700 metres squared and is located around 40 metres to the northeast of the Fox Inn, which is a Grade 2 listed building. There are dwellings nearby to the west and southwest of the site. The parcel of land located on the opposite side of the junction between the 4204 and New Road, approximately 12 metres from the application site, is the subject of a refused planning application, which was reference M/25/01286/FUL for a single traveller pitch, but over a larger area. And And there are a number of differences between the two sites, which I can go into in a short while. This application proposes a new gated access with a small section of close bordered fencing, as well as hardcore gravel finish to the site. The application is retrospective insofar as it relates to the creation of the access fencing and crushed hardcore throughout the site, and the change of use for the stationing of the 2 touring caravans that are currently there. The elements that have yet to be implemented on site if permission is granted include the installation of the 2 static caravans and the proposed sheds and planting. As caravans are not building, no elevations of these are required to be provided, so the only requirement is for the units to meet the caravan regulations limitations. Your officers have recommended a condition to ensure dark stain or cladding to the static caravans proposed. But as I say, I've got no elevations to show you. During the course of the application, the applicant was required to submit a speed survey and provide visibility displays of the access, which can be seen here. The information provided has been found acceptable by the Highways Authority, and the plan confirms that no additional hedges or trees would need to be removed to secure visibility. The only hard boundary treatment proposed in the plans is the gated entrance shown here. It has already been implemented, but your officers have recommended a condition for this element to be finished in a dark stain, which would be first agreed with the local planning authority. These are the proposed sheds. They're a small domestic scale and design, and again a condition has been recommended to secure a dark stain finish to these. Turning to the photographs, we've got a view into the site from the roadside. This is looking towards the new gated entrance and looking across the site from the Fox Inn car park. Looking across the site frontage from the Fox Inn. Just some photos of the site prior to the development. You'll see some of the trees were removed, and you can see the existing, what was the existing gated access onto the site. And just a photograph of the Fox Inn itself, which is obviously a listed building. Just raising some points from the officer's report. The council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of travellers' pitches, and as such, paragraph 11 DII of the MPPF is engaged. That's the tilted balance in effect. So as you'll have seen from the officer's report, whilst the development would result in some visual harm to the surrounding area, arising primarily from the erection of the access gates and fence, due to the small extent of these, your officers consider that a refusal based on the visual impact of the development and the character of the area could not reasonably be sustained in this instance. And in view of the shortfall of traveller sites, it's considered that the adverse impacts of the development would not outweigh the benefit of the contribution the site can make towards the current acknowledged shortfall. So that's why your officers are recommending that permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in your officer's report.
Thank you, Anna. With Parish Council Representative, Councillor Tom Clark. You get 3 minutes. Oh, sorry. Got it wrong.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. On behalf of Hanley Broadheath Parish Council, we object to this application. Only 8 days ago, the authority refused the application on the opposite corner of the same junction, citing heritage harm, unacceptable landscape impact, highway problems and inadequate services. Yet this application is recommended for approval, despite raising the same core issues. Firstly, strangely, the report accepts that no 10% biodiversity net gain is required because the 150-year-old shelter belt and protected hedgerows were cleared before the application was submitted. Worrying, that appears to mean a developer who ecological assets first avoids any need to meet these requirements. We question the morality of this. Deliberate and unauthorised works are a material planning consideration and should weigh against permission. Second, the officer's conclusions are inconsistent with the recent refusal across the road. The same listed building, the same junction, and the same landscape character are involved. Yet the harm to the Fox Inn is reduced, here to very limited. Landscape harm is said to be manageable by condition, and a road safety shortfall is dismissed. On one side of the road, these harms justified refusal. On the other, larger site, they apparently do not. Third, this is not a sustainable location. Hanley Broadheath is the lowest settlement tier. It has no school, no shop, one bus a day, term time only, and the nearest GP 9 kilometres away. Policy requires travellers' sites to be in locations with sustainable or active access to services. This does not meet that test. The officer says tilted balance should apply because of a shortfall of traveller sites, but the answer to a shortage of suitable sites is not to approve unsuitable ones. Finally, key objections remain unresolved. The Tree and Landscape Officer maintains an objection, and the Conservation Officer identifies harm to the setting of a Grade 2 listed building. In addition, there is no clear drainage strategy, no ecological survey, unresolved road safety concerns, and the site remains in an unsustainable location with overbearing impact. Planning permission runs with the land permanently. The question is not about who is there now, but whether this site is suitable for the use in the long term. It is not. For those reasons, we ask the committee to consider refusing this application. Thank you.
And we have a objector, a local resident.
Chairman and members, last week in refusing permission for the Traveller site directly opposite, the Council concluded that development at this junction would cause unacceptable harm to the Grade 2 listed Fox Inn, unacceptable landscape and visual harm, and unacceptable highway impacts. Why should different conclusions apply here? Both sites occupy the same rural junction, the same landscape character area, and the same heritage setting. Both have around 30 metres of frontage facing the Fox Inn's curtilage. Both are retrospective traveller developments in open countryside. Both rely on landscaping and screening to reduce their impact. The principal difference is that this proposal is more intensive, involving twice the number of caravans and 2 permanent sheds. In refusing the opposite scheme, the Council concluded that the linear vegetated area is a key landscape feature, that screening could not adequately mitigate the harm, and that meaningful mitigation would require restoration of the site. Your Tree and Landscape Officer has also concluded that the current proposals are in conflict with NPPF and South Worcestershire Development Plan policies, yet the recommendation before you gives limited weight to these concerns. The contrast is particularly striking in relation to the Fox Inn. The harm arising from the opposite site was assessed as less than substantial at the medium level. Here, the report concludes that harm is only very limited, despite the larger scale of development. Please consider whether that distinction has been convincingly justified. Other community concerns have been downplayed, for example relating to road safety, where a lack of a visibility splay within land under the applicant's control was cited as a reason for refusal opposite, but is tolerated here. Members are entitled to question this and other inconsistencies. The Council's traveller pit shortfall is an important material consideration. However, the refusal opposite demonstrates that unmet need does not automatically outweigh harm to heritage assets, landscape character, highway safety and rural distinctiveness when applying the NPPF planning balance. The Council has already recognised that this junction is environmentally sensitive and vulnerable to urbanising change. Approving this proposal after refusing the site opposite would be difficult to reconcile and could weaken the Council's position should that refusal be appealed. For those reasons, I respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application, applying the same reasoning and policy approach adopted for the site opposite. Thank you.
No. That's been covered by legal as well. Yep. We have no agent. So a ward member, Councillor Dwayne Hubbard, is going to speak from there. Dwayne's urgently wanting to do his training, but hasn't had time.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, councillors. Obviously, this matter was put before the committee because of the local objections and the various concerns that everybody has had in the community. The planning officer's recommendation for approval of the travel site is heavily based on the principle of tilted balance, and this is used to advocate points of planning that would normally be used to refuse a planning application. An important fact to be considered that's already been mentioned is that planning has just been refused for a traveller site directly opposite. Albeit this application is approximately twice the size of the area, twice the caravans, twice the occupancy of the one that's already been refused, we can also infer that the impact here would also be twice as detrimental. Originally, we had a plot of land that was undisputedly in open countryside, a green space that had incorporated an ancient woodland and tree line. What has happened since the acquisition of the land is a serendipitous removal of the wooded area and green space, including an established wildlife habitat, only to be replaced with a barren, hardcore space, totally incongruous to the landscape and without an iota of concern to any wildlife, ecological or environmental damage. The ancient tree line has a specific environmental role to the geographical location, which is plagued by extreme weather conditions, the tree line screening and protecting the surrounding area, including the Grade 2 listed building that's adjacent. Other than returning the site back to its original condition, which could take decades, there could never be any net biodiversity gain. The Fox Inn, a Grade 2 listed building, looks directly over the application site, which sits irrefutably obtrusive on the landscape, with absolutely no respect or integration within the countryside. Already there are gates and fencing that are grossly offensive to the surroundings, as well as the visual impact on the listed building. The site sits on hard clay. We all know the subsoil layer is impervious and widely accepted to be unsuitable for drainage. There is no stated or obvious means of drainage or for sanitary or rainwater management, which is contrary to the SWDP 29 and 31. There is no adequate supply of power or water, neither is there management for refuge or recycling. In relation to highways, this is the location is almost directly on top of what is the busy A4204 and New Road, with heavy use compounded by farm traffic. The curtilage of this site has no verges, no footpaths. The site is small for the requirements of numerous children at play. There is the high risk of children spilling out onto the highway, and most of us know children's ability to stray. Whether or not there is an adequate visual display, a danger is present. The speed survey in the side road indicates an average speed of 21-23 miles an hour. From my previous law enforcement background, I'm aware that at a speed of 20 miles an hour, there's a 10% chance of child fatality. At 30 miles an hour, that increases to 40 to 50%. In relation to the requirements and sustainability of this individual application site, it couldn't be any further or remote from services, shops, schools, doctors, safe play areas and other amenities, and certainly does not fit within the guidelines of being within easy reach of such. The school in Martley where the children attend is actually 11.6 kilometres away, or 7.7 miles. There is no consideration of other traveller site options. There is also the question of longevity or future use of the application site, as the applicants have stated wanting to settle in permanent housing and are on a housing list. which would be nearer a settlement and essential amenities. This is especially important if we are considering the children's needs. Stated case, Ward versus Secretary of State for Levelling Communities in Basildon District Council 2024, specifically defends the decision to protect Greenbelt over the best interest of children. Pertinent in this case, and with the added weight that some points of approval could be interpreted as being against their best interest. There are many small pockets of land in the surrounding area that could then lend themselves vulnerable to similar applications. Setting a precedent of approval for such development could trigger a growing trend of detriment to Greenbelt. To sum up, the necessity is for a suitable home for travelling family with several children. Is that proportionate to the loss of open countryside, the impact on a nearby Grade 2 listed building, the environmental impact caused by the destruction of woodland and the countryside, the weak sustainability argument for the location, and the detriment to being so far away from amenities and the risk from adjacent highways? I add there are no very special circumstances as per the definition in the MPPF and the PPTS. Is the tilted balance commensurate to the amount of overall collateral harm that approval could present and the local and the wider communities? It's a 2 lines. It's a difficult decision for the committee, but I suggested in this instance it may not be suitable for approval, and by suggesting refusal, maybe more appropriate options become available to the applicant and their family over losing open countryside. Thank you.
Anna.
Yeah, I'll just come back on a couple of bits because I realise I didn't reflect on the recent refusal of the adjacent site, which I think is probably important for me to touch on just so you can understand the differences. In terms of, I'll just go through what the reasons for refusal of that site were. So there was the impact on the setting of the listed building Fox, and as is the Fox Inn, and as has been mentioned, the conservation officers identified that harm as being on the medium level. Then there was the impact of the loss of the trees around the boundary of that site and the introduction of the hard fencing and the exposure of the laid hardcore and so forth, having an unacceptable impact on the local landscape and the landscape character. I am paraphrasing, so hopefully I'm not missing anything out. There was visibility displays couldn't be achieved from the access of that site. And then finally, there was a generator on that site, and there was no information to show that they could get access to facilities, and I think the generator was causing some issues in terms of noise for local residents. In looking at the site before us today, the main difference I would say in terms of how consultees have come to me with different views, such as the limited less than substantial harm identified in the conservation officer's comment about the impact on the listed building, it's to do with the fact that on this site they've removed some, but most of the trees and hedgerows about the site have been retained, and they're only proposing the section of fencing and gates that is currently there. There's no other hard development around the boundary that would be proposed, and as our landscape officer said in his comments, it might be preferable for there to be an internal hard boundary and a dark stain just to help shield it some more, but the fact is that there's existing screening. So I think that's the main difference. Similarly with the visibility displays on this site, they've been achieved. It's a different slight bend in the road when you come out of this site, so there's no visibility issue, there's no highway issue. There's no generator on this site, and the applicant has indicated that they would be applying to get on-site services and that they're capable of getting those. I understand on the previous application we didn't have that information because nothing was forthcoming. I don't know if I've missed anything else, but yeah, though that's the main difference. So when you look at what policy SWDP 22 says in terms of new traveller sites, the wording is that the site should not have any significant impact on, for example, conservation areas, local green space, significant gaps, and that there's no significant visual impact on the landscape that cannot be mitigated with the use of appropriate planting. So my recommendation has come from the point of view that consultees haven't raised that there are significant impacts. We've got the limited, less than substantial harm to the listed building, and we've got a fairly limited adverse impact on the landscape character identified by the landscape officer, of which is acknowledged that some of which can be mitigated by planting, which is specifically what the policy requires. So that's where, in weighing things up, I've come to a different conclusion to my colleague Jack on the other application. I hope that was clear, because it's complicated.
Councillor Douglas Godwin. Being the nearest thing to a local member that's able to...
Oh yes, yeah, okay. Declaring interest. I used to meet there with the Clifton Hunt, unbox the pony on a car park anyway, so I know the area. I think that the two speakers we had, Jason Yarnold and the anonymous member for the committee, you know, reps interlocutor. The facts speak for themselves. And despite Anna's attempts, the word flogging a dead horse comes to mind in this circumstance. We've got very, very similar circumstance the other side of the road, which has just been refused. And here we are again with a similar set of circumstances. Okay, yeah, there are differences, but, you know, there's a certain amount of common sense is necessary. Now, the B4204 is a quiet road at the moment because it's broken. Very broken. And I wonder how long it will be broken for, but it will be repaired. Yeah, our county officer would know more, but, you know, it's sort of, you know, it's a sad circumstance. But, you know, it's a quiet road now, but really that is a Ridgeway road. It's one of the principal roads to Tenbury Wells. It's on a ridgeway. That's why the trees were there. The trees were there from medieval times because the road is across the ridge, it allows drainage, and the trees would give cover to the coaching in. Oh, the fox, there it is. So cutting down the trees, you know, that is a serious thing. They're there for a purpose. And there's a photograph of a bit further on. No, keep going. Yes, there we are. There we are. That's that side. Yes, that. Now that looks like a gap to me. Might have been trees there, but they planted rhododendrons. Laurel? I take it back. Laurel. Not really an English. Not really an English hedgerow. It's exasperating. It really is. Everything that was in the report for a refusal, I think, can be used as an argument for a refusal of this. The paragraph 2 of the reasons for refusal next door is still applicable. I go over the report to one of the conclusions. In light of the above, it is considered that the development fails to integrate with the surrounding and reinforce local distinctiveness. Well, that applies too, doesn't it? It applied on the other side, certainly applies there. So, an okay tilted balance, you know, so on and so forth. Common sense, please. So, taking all this into account, and despite Anna's proposals that it is different, I think the average Joe in the street, the man on the Clapham omnibus, would think no, and I think no too. So therefore, I am going to propose refusal.
You are minded to propose refusal after listening.
After other people have
Right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, so we haven't got the supply of gypsy sites that we need, and neither have we for many years. And we will find ourselves in this difficult position time and time again until such a time as we actually get hold of this issue. It's unfortunate, I think that's one word we could use. There are other words we might use, when these two competing, well, not competing, but similar applications, literally across the road from each other, have kind of juxtaposed at this same point in time. I listened very carefully to Anna because I think the representations we received were pretty compelling and to some extent quite damaging in terms of reputational management, because there seemed to be, on the face of it, an element of inconsistency that people would struggle to get their heads around. Now, the one thing I did hear very clearly was the visibility display on t'other site was not achievable, and so that is a perfectly reasonable material reason for refusal. Now, the reason we have properties like the Fox with the status that they enjoy is to protect not only themselves but their curtilage. And this, as far as I can see, is just the other side of that curtilage, literally a matter of a few meters. So I think it's really unfortunate we've got the juxtaposition of these two applications, and we, in a way, we're obliged to think of contrast, to compare them, but actually we shouldn't. We should be looking at this as a separate application and not have the implications of what a previous decision on our shoulders. And Anna's made the point that actually the other one did actually have a material reason for refusal. I think, to me, the essence comes down to the Conservation Officer and Landscape Officer's comments about moderate, I think. He talked about moderate harm. Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and if you've got 10 people there and you ask them to quantify the degree of harm, they come up with different solutions. And, you know, I'm struggling with this because you can sense from what I'm saying that I'm frustrated that we haven't got a 5-year supply, which means we are going to find ourselves in this situation time and time again until it's resolved. And that's a really difficult one, because if we refuse this tonight, we're going to have to rock up to an appeal and explain to the inspectorate that we haven't got a 5-year supply, but we still don't think we should approve this. Now, in the past, and I'm not going to suggest this, but in the past, one solution to this situation might have been a temporary permission for 2 or 3 years. But I'm not going to do that because my experience tells me that when you get to the end of that period, there's an issue of enforcement and then an appeal against the enforcement notice, and actually you lose control of the whole thing at that point. It takes on a life of its own. So I'm not going to suggest that, though perhaps people in the past might have done. So on the basis of what I've heard so far, and with the huge respect for Anna and her team, I am not persuaded that this application should be approved on the basis of what I've heard so far.
Yes, some very erudite comments there. To me, it's totally unsustainable. It's nowhere near any services. It's nowhere near a school. I couldn't even find a shop when I drove up and down on Google Earth. I don't know where the nearest one is, and certainly there's no school. Public transport is pretty non-existent from what I understand. So that, to me, squares it for me, the fact that it's in a totally inconsistent location for where gypsy and caravan sites should be located. What, within 800 metres of services?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, this is about 8,000 metres from services.
7, 8 miles from Thunder.
So to me, I would refuse it on those grounds. I'm minded to anyway.
Kathy, have you anything to?
Through you, Chair, thank you. It does disturb me that we're saying there's no impact on the trees, etc., when clearly there already has been. I know you could say there's no future impact, but it feels, maybe in planning terms you can't do this, but it just feels unfair that because the impact has already happened, we can't reference it. You know.
Sorry, have you finished? Yeah. I would say, having been to the site and looked at it, and I didn't realise initially that this site was basically totally where trees had been chopped down. A whole sweat. We're not talking of a small hedge of trees. It was a band of trees, which, as Douglas said, have been deliberately planted for environmental purposes. And I think to allow that to go ahead is not right. I was also, I don't see, I recently had an enforcement in my village against close board fencing. And the reason it was is because it's an urbanising effect. And yet we've got here large gates with a fencing going into it, and we're told that it's, yes, it is less than the site opposite, but it's still significant and totally out of kilter with. I also got lost. I didn't get lost. I went into the lane, couldn't turn down, and went about a mile down. It gets narrower and narrower. But I saw nothing of that nature there. It is totally out of context with the rural area there. So is the Laurel. It's I think there was a gateway there, wasn't there? And that was closed up, which makes sense. No, but already I say trees, I should think 40, 50 meters wide, whatever the width for this site is, the trees have been taken out. And I say you've got, I don't know how long that stretch of trees, 2-3 miles long, that goes, and this is just part of it. It will obviously have an impact on the pub, because those have always been there, that's been part of it. So you are affecting its grading. I think there is sufficient damage in that case to refuse it, I'm afraid. And that is it from me. So, Douglas, I think you've already indicated.
Thank you. After hearing our committee's comments, and despite Anna's pleadings in mitigation, I feel that this is an inappropriate application and would move refusal against the planner's proposal. And I'm sure Simon will have things, but SWDP R5, 22, 28, 34 come to mind. Some others, no doubt, can be found, but I would move refusal as proposed at the moment. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got the wording of the refusal of the application on the opposite side of the road, and whilst the circumstances aren't identical, there's a chunk of that reason 2, which basically captures what the mood of the committee. And I would sort of precede that, because what that doesn't cover on that site is the introduction of the close boarded gate and fences, which is the or fencing, which has been which is a concern in terms of its visual intrusion. So if we have the introduction of the close boarded gate and fencing, and the loss of vegetation, and the addition of the caravans, which do form part of the local landscape character and thus appear incongruous, has resulted in the introduction of an anthropogenic form of development, which is visually at odds with the natural organic character of the immediate surrounding area. As a result of this, it is considered that the development represents an incongruous addition to the local landscape and is visually obtrusive in views from within the surrounding area. Due to the significant nature of the visual impact of the development on the local landscape, it is not considered that this impact can be mitigated through the proposed planting.
A proposed planting scheme.
Or proposed planting scheme. And more specifically, in order to mitigate this level of impact, the site would need to be returned to its former state, something which would not be possible alongside retention of the development. In light of the above, it's considered that the development fails to integrate with its surroundings and reinforce local distinctiveness, and therefore has a detrimental impact on the character, appearance and visual amenity of the application site and surrounding area, contrary to policies that were mentioned by Councillor Goldwyn. which are the same as those mentioned for the other site.
Can we also include the other sustainability of the site from the point of view of the travellers?
That's a separate reason. But my only caution with that is I think there've been probably quite a few of the other situations where there've been approvals. Those sites probably haven't scored particularly well in terms of those sustainability considerations. We are admittedly under a new local plan, so if that was the point, perhaps anticipating Councillor Wells' point.
Chairman,
you know,
Councillor Cathy Wells was on the money, I thought, but so was John Michael. Do we not have a policy which describes the relationship of a site with the settlement and the facilities and amenities one would expect? And did I not have in the back of my mind 800 metres? I seem to recall it Bastonford on the main road between Worcester and Malvern, that site there, and we were measuring carefully how it was reflected the. Okay, so it would have to increase over 7 miles to fall foul. Now, what I would say is, just because the other application is silent on this matter, that does not and should not fetter this committee this evening from identifying, which Councillor Michael really explained really well, and that is that it isn't just about landscape. It's about the people who live there and their lives and their lifestyle and the thing that we expect everybody else to be able to have. So do we not have a policy still? And just because it wasn't referenced in the other side, surely we wouldn't, that shouldn't fetter us tonight, surely.
We do have a policy that's actually been referred to by members tonight. It's the part in the SWDP R22 for traveller sites, which talks about being reasonably located in relation to schools, GP surgeries, etc. There's no defined distance. It's not the same consideration as you'd have for like new residential development. There's no definition of what reasonable is. We can only look at previous appeal decisions and the planning policy for traveller sites, which has a little bit of discussion about that. So I'd say you use your judgment. It's up to members to make that judgment as to what they consider is reasonable and whether.
Chairman, it's difficult to define what's reasonable or unreasonable. But one way of looking at it is it walkable? Because at the moment you get in your car to have to go somewhere, that's not really a sustainable location, is it? And that's how we would judge a house in this situation. We'd say it's outside the settlement boundary.
Because we've got a new development policy. If we're turning this down on that thing, then we might get advice from the inspectors on what they think is reasonable.
It's a different reason, isn't it?
I must admit, one of the statistics I'm aware of is travellers' children are far more likely to be at risk from traffic, and the death rate is far higher. And this site did concern me in that way. So, but I don't think we can put that down as a reason, but it's true nonetheless.
So I think we've got proposed development would, by reason of its distance from school, GP surgery, other day-to-day facilities, shops, result in an unsustainable form of development.
Yeah. Tie that into that.
Clearly, in some respects, that's a more tangible reason for refusal than subjective stuff.
Are you happy that that's captured everything? Do you want to add anything to that? No, fine, okay.
Thank you. It did, didn't I? Yeah. Well, I don't think you should have a proposal set from the chair unless you have to.
All of those in favour of the motion to refuse permission, contrary to officer recommendation, please raise your voting cards. That's unanimous.
Two. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Right. I've been asked to close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you, Dean.